Hello, everybody. Greetings to everyone here today joining the Innovation Speaker Series. The Atlantic Canada Climate Network is proud to co present this event with the Canadian Environmental Network. And we have come together for this project to showcase cutting edge emergent technologies and their ideas and their potential to advance climate solutions and create new opportunities. But before I begin, I would love to respectfully recognize and acknowledge the relationships that First Nation, Inuit, and Métis across Canada have with this beautiful land that all Canadians live on and enjoy. Happy spring to everybody. It's such a wonderful time to be in Canada. And we would like to recognize that this ACCN operates on the traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqiyik, Passamaquoddy, and Penobscot, as well as the Abenaki Nations, or what is called the Wabanaki Confederacy, as well as Innu and Inuit peoples. This territory is covered by treaties of peace and friendship, which these nations first signed with the British Crown in 1726. These treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. So it is in this spirit of peace and friendship that I greet you all today. And it also reminds us that each of these 634 different First Nations communities, the 53 Inuit communities, and 8 Métis settlements all have a very unique historical, cultural, spiritual, and environmentally sustainable connection to the land that their people and ancestors and future generations have inhabited since time immemorial. We encourage all Canadians and, of course, visitors to these lands to learn about and regularly acknowledge the historic and current relationships that exist between the unceded land on for which we live and work and love and enjoy and prosper, and to consider how the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis are here and how we all as individuals can personally contribute to Canada's reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. With that, and so much deep gratitude, the Innovation Speaker Series aims to foster collaboration and knowledge exchange amongst diverse stakeholders that are passionate about addressing climate change. So today we welcome Dan Hendry. And Dan is the co founder and driving force behind the Get on the Bus movement driven by Small Change Fund. So Dan is a passionate advocate for public transportation and youth empowerment, and he has spent actually over a decade promoting public transportation options and engaging young people in their communities. So, Dan's work on the Kingston Transit High School Bus Pass program inspired this Get on the Bus movement. And that's what we're going to talk about today, as well as his dedication and leadership, which have been instrumental in its success. So, with that, I humbly pass the mic over to Dan. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks for having me. I'm just going to spend 1 second here, like normal, getting my screen set up. Just 2 seconds here, share sound. And I appreciate everyone taking the time out of their day to come and listen to this. I will say for the little bit of time, Ashley, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Perfect. And I'm hoping everyone else can as well. I just can't see you on my screens at the moment, the way my setup is. I have several screens and some notes. I'm going to do my best for you over the next 30 to 40 minutes. And then please, I'm guessing in the chat or at the end, we can have a discussion. I am very passionate about this. My name is Dan Hendry. I'll tell you the whole story. And I'm going to start from where I am right now in Kingston, Ontario, on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. That's where I'm calling from. And the logo you see today, driven by Small Change Fund, the small logo in the corner is actually a charity, a national charity that I partnered with on this project. And I'm going to tell you the whole story from start to end. I can't wait. And I do get excited about this. So let me start here. This is actually a bit of an agenda, but it's more about the picture. It's the students, the first group of students, the students that we didn't know what we were doing yet. We just knew it was a good opportunity. And we actually took them down to City Hall at that time. And so we hadn't figured out the process and logistics and everything I'm going to be talking about today. But these are young grade 9s getting their first bus pass at City of Kingston. And I'll start there. So you're going to see two parts of my life. You're going to see what we developed in Kingston, and though I'm an advocate and a promoter and a champion, and I still work on the project through my part-time job at the local public school board, Limestone District School Board, I only work part-time there, and I've always worked on other contracts or jobs in my passion, which is sustainability. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about this story. This is just a picture as soon as April 19th, 2023. This is both coming from TVO, and the other one in 2018. Through 2018 to 23, actually starting in 2012, where the story actually starts, there was some movement in Ontario and across Canada looking at Kingston saying, you know, it's a mid-sized community. There's a lot of Canadian mid-sized communities. What are they doing right? Like, what are the pieces? And by all means, this is a part of a story. The youth aspect, the fair, free transit for youth, the training, the engagement, the partnership with the school board, or the school boards, actually, that have evolved over time. But Kingston Transit, especially from 2012 to 23, had invested in their infrastructure and express bus routes and their customer service focus. There was so much good that was clicking in Kingston. And I'm a passionate transit rider myself, and it's so good to be part of a story of that. But I'm going to take you back. So it started off in 2012. This is a bit of that timeline, especially in the developmental years of what I'm going to be talking about today. In the first year, it actually was grade nines. It was more political. And actually, I forgot about this, but I was looking up the other day. It actually was catalyzed through a conversation around the fact that Kingston has a Kingston Gets Active Pass. And this is the idea that students in grade 9 or 14 can go to the YMCA or Kingston facilities and exercise. And the conversation back in 2011 was, well, how can we get more students using it, more kids using it? And this was the idea from a political level that the counselors and the trustees of the school board said, counselors, let's let grade nines ride for free. It started there. But what happened was pretty magical. So in my opinion, I guess, but I think it's pretty cool. And I hope by the end of it, you'll agree with that statement, is that we kind of worked together. We didn't totally know where it was going, right? We were patient, respectful of each other, but we did bring different pieces to this. And so over the next years, we developed kind of the distribution, the logistics, and that's a big part of what this became. So the city of Kingston, when it started, it asked kids to take their ID and their itinerary to City Hall to pick them up. But how inefficient is that in some way, right? You have all the families trying to get the ID and the itineraries and take them down. And of course, that's still a way. But working with the city officials at the time, we said, well, let's do it through our school system. We have to respect privacy and we want to train and we got to work within the school schedule because you're taking kids out of class. But what a great way to get them to normalize transit together, to tap the pass, to learn about how to put their bike on, how to stop it. But what I've realized more and more when I do this training, and I've done this training since 2012 in my community, is that they're learning together. And one of my main questions I ask now youth is, well, how many of you already use it? And now you're getting more and more hands, those early adopters. And that's what I realize is they train each other, they show each other. So it's a great behavioral intervention to show them and get them comfortable with it. But it's also the why. The why in the way that I mean the ties to the environment, the ties to mental health, autonomy, volunteering, work, access to work, parent time, all the things you're going to think about once you start putting this together. And I'll show a little bit more. Now, these are the stats that I got from the City of Kingston report. And I have all these reports if you're ever interested. The first year, there were 28,000 grade nines, okay? What was cool, though, so they're 14. This was the first year it ever happened. It never happened before. We didn't know what we were doing. So as we figured out the logistics, as I said, getting the bus passes distributed through the school system. Another interesting fact is Kingston Transit actually has never done the training. It's been me from the school board because I'm in education. And so we co-created that over time. Now, what I'm super happy to say and see, and why I've always been so supportive and enthusiastic about this, is because what I saw with my own two eyes, I've heard with my ears, right? And I've seen over time. And I think in a time with disinformation and misinformation, we have to lean into community and we have to lean into good solutions that we've seen. We can adopt, we can adapt, we have to. We're different in some ways, different parts of Canada, of course, but there's commonality as well. And so what I mean by this, a couple of really exciting things from this point. I think it was about 2017, a young woman named Veronica Sullivan, she was at the University of Waterloo. She completed her master's thesis on this. And she found that grade 12 students use it 3 times more than grade 9s. She also found that it could be a great catalyst for youth independence, confidence, and travel. Also for the transit systems, that it was applicable to help grow ridership in our communities. And this was another piece of my life that I was like, oh man, we're doing something right, right? Like, from a climate point of view, well, I'll get into that actually. I have slides for that. Sorry. This isn't me just about bragging about these awards. I look at these as opportunities to share the story, much like a webinar, an article on TV, or an article in the newspaper, a segment on TV or podcast. Anytime I can share the story, I do, because it means so much to me. And my human existence is Canadian as a male. I might live to 80, right? I've already been working on this for like over an eighth of my life. And I think this is where I got to play. This is what I have to help with. This is what I'm supposed to do. And so I take every opportunity to share. But what was cool was in 2018, we won this award from something called the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Now, it's a knowledge base across Canada because a lot of municipalities have similar services. So it shares knowledge, best practices, helps catalyze new ideas. And so this is me doing a presentation there, which was great. I was very nervous. But what came from it was something that's available for you. There's a bilingual guide on how we created this whole program, including like field trip forms we used from the school board point of view, because you wanted to let their parents know that their children were getting this access to this freedom, right? And with freedom, as I tell the students, come responsibility. So this is available online, and I can get it to you. So the next year, this is all before COVID, right? This was when it was really clicking, and it stopped for a while, but it's even better now, I would say. So I was lucky enough, actually, this is the NAC in Ottawa. I'm telling you, this is not just about me bragging about a TEDx or whatever. This is about my dog could repeat that talk. I tell you, I've spent so many hours memorizing that. But there's a 10-minute video of kind of like what I'm doing now, but it's just 10 minutes long. Moving backgrounds, all the things I've kind of shown. So know that these resources exist to help if you ever want to champion and show the story. Now, I don't always talk about this, but I put it in for this slide, not just this here about the Climate Reality Project, but my personal background. I have a business degree, but I also have a master's I've done in strategic leadership towards sustainability. And I did it in Sweden. I did it in 2007. So I have a master's in sustainability. I've always championed this project because of my belief around in climate action, social justice, and the environment. But what I've also learned is how to tell the story 100 different ways, because there's so many co-benefits. And one cool thing for some of you, if you're a climate nerd like me, is that it was selected as a 24 hours of reality project. In fact, I didn't get to go on screen, but the Climate Reality Canada did, and Al Gore facilitated a session around transportation. But what was cool to me is there was a 2-minute short video tying it to that. And I heard, this is just hearsay, so you can take it or leave it. This could be misinformation or disinformation, but at least I'm putting the community note already. Al Gore, I heard, saw this video. So I was always proud of that because I'm a bit of a nerd on that, but I can't tell you if it's true or not. So I just like to believe. Now, as this part of the fundamental story that kind of catalyzed the movement across Canada, which I'll be talking about, this came up. So in 2017, there was a fare change. Okay, transit systems do that occasionally, right? And it also changed the structure. So what you'll see there in Kingston is a child is 0 to 14 and they can ride for free. Okay, 14 and under. Now, 14 is also grade 9. And so that's that threshold of, if they have the pass or they're 14. From a governance point of view and a council point of view, children ride for free. Now, high school students, how we've angled our program, are kind of 15 to 21. Now, if I've heard things, well, what happens if you're 15 and you're not in school? There's other, from a transit, from the city's point of view, there's other affordability pathways. This was just to structure this as we have. Another interesting piece that does affect my story to you is that you'll see that youth 15 to 24, there's actually kind of a young adult pass, I like to call it, right? Like youth that way, where it's actually a cheaper monthly pass, okay? And my point for this allowed for a couple of things. One, when we had the conversation with transit that they were gonna do the 0 to 14, because it was originally 0 to 12, that kind of sparked a new idea for schools, which I'm gonna share. But two, it also segregated out a small group in the youth category, young adult category, to see that over time we can start to see that the people are starting to purchase the passes as they go into adulthood. And this is that transit culture. We know, well, I got more no stats for that. Sorry, I got a slide about climate. I was going to get very climate nerdy, but it's almost there. So this is another lovely little video. This is a real kindergarten class getting on a real bus on a real route going down to Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. This is a pre-existing resource. transit systems usually are functioning at their peaks. Their peaks are before and after school and work. That's when people move, right? And now not all routes are the same. I get it. Not all communities are the same. I understand. But there is more capacity usually during the daytime hours. And it fits perfectly in the policy because we know that 0 to 14, 0 to grade 9 ride for free without a bus pass in Kingston. Okay. And so what we did is we created a mechanism at the time that the principal or the teachers would have one pass to tap for their field trip. And then the school board would pay for those adult taps, which was fairly nominal considering it catalyzed 900 plus field trips. Right? We're just paying for the adult ride. That's public transit, right? But we did it in a centralized and a smart way while sharing stats. Okay. This is why I'm passionate about that. This is before X and all that and bumper stickers and hey, I just sent the screenshots. But what it shows to me is the power of community. Outside play in the winter, right? Libraries, swim to survive, theater. These are public assets that we pay for. So it also gets and maximizes pre-existing investment. And what a great way to learn. This is how I would have learned. And that's why I'm passionate about this too. This is getting people connected to their community when we need it the most, when we have to lean in with the stories that are coming that are so hard, right? And show hope for children. And so I get very passionate about this. And I have some personal stories on this as well. Now, these are 3 things about that ridership piece. One is that, remember in 2017, I said they changed the fare structure there. This showed several things. One, despite ridership challenges related to COVID, the number of youth monthly passes sold in Kingston is higher than it was pre-COVID, from 625 versus 315. Youth passes sold per month had increased by nearly 140% since January 2017. And from the Director of Transportation, Jeremy Nacosta, that helped me build all this program in Kingston, his statement was youth passes decreased. The high school program was introduced. It was short-term pain. However, monthly youth passes sales now far exceed prior to the program, long-term gain. And the co-benefits you're going to see are transformational. So I'm going to start talking about Get on the Bus. And this is what it's about. That was the catalyst. That was 10 years plus of my life anyway. And I still love working on it more and more now and sharing the story. By all means, I do not own this story. It's our story. Communities across Canada are taking that body of work and adapting it and learning from it and using it. And luckily, through COVID, actually, I'm friends with Mike Morris. He's a Green MP out of Kitchener. And he kind of was coaching me. He said, Dan, you need time and money. Like, you can't keep on doing this at night on the weekend whenever anyone calls. You still have full-time work and a family. And so I was lucky to partner with Small Change Fund. It's a charity based in Toronto, but ranges across Canada, working on great work in climate action, social justice, and reconciliation. And they work on a variety of projects across Canada with partners. And so I'm lucky I was kind of able to be, this idea was absorbed into that charity, and I had a team. And I missed a team, and I needed a team. I always say to my daughter, if you want to go far, go alone. Or no, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And I've read that as a small kind of saying, and I just loved it. I love being part of a team. It means a lot to me. And so our mission with Get on the Bus is to get youth on the bus for free. Now, that's the youth on the bus for free. That doesn't mean there can't be other mechanisms or payments and stuff like that. Municipalities bear a lot of weight in Canada. Train them how to use it, and we help communities develop policies, partnerships, resources to help create youth-friendly, focused transit programs and engagement opportunities. So we launched in 2023 through a grant of the McConnell Foundation, and we did a national webinar. And so this was how we kicked off the brand and the movement and the website and the assets and the idea. And now it's not me. I'm going to ask Ashley if you could say yes, if you can hear it, but I actually have a short video here from 2 students that zoomed in from that webinar to talk about their experience. So I'm going to move to that. I just want to make sure it sounds right for you guys.
Hi all, I'm Maeve. I'm a grade 12
we can
student
hear
at
it.
college in Kingston. And so being a grade 12 student with my bus pass has allowed me to balance school, extracurriculars, and work. And this really wouldn't be possible without my bus pass. My bus pass has provided me with security for knowing that I'll always have a safe ride to and from work. And in addition, the bus pass for high school students has made access to extracurriculars and learning opportunities possible. Speaking from my personal experience, I'm a member of the Ultimate Frisbee team, and my whole team was able to travel to our tournaments and games using the Kingston bus pass. In the classroom, many of our classes this year have gone on field trips using the bus. So for example, we were able to attend the Kingston Film Festival with my English class. And finally, as an environmental specialist high skills major student, I was able to complete my enrichment activity at Queen's University using my bus pass. As the eco minister of my school, when I take the bus, I'm proud to know that I'm making a positive choice to minimize my personal impact on the environment. And then to conclude, without my bus pass, some of the most influential experiences and learning opportunities for me would have not been accessible without my bus pass.
Well, I don't know how I'm going to top that, but I had a job filming a local hockey team's games, and it was good to have the bus in my back pocket. I even have my bus pass here today. In case I couldn't be driven to the games, I would always just take the bus to and from my games, and that would really help me. I also use the bus to get to and from school daily, and I know many of my fellow classmates do as well. It also makes it easier to hang out with friends. I've taken public transit many times to get to various places to hang out with friends. Having the transit card really gives me freedom and helps me become more independent. It also allows me to see my friends wherever and whenever I want, which is essential for young and older teenagers. The training also is really helpful because, funny story, one time my friend who didn't go to training day because he wasn't there, he was sick, he tried to get on the bus through the back doors instead of the front doors, but I helped him get on properly as I was there during training day. Training day helps students understand rules and safety on the bus they would otherwise have to learn on their own, and it only took 20 minutes. And this one gets said a lot, but again, it's the more people on public transportation means fewer cars on the road, which means less emissions and traffic. And let's face it, who doesn't want less traffic? Another thing is that it also, like Maeve was saying, it does help to get to extracurriculars. Like I'm part of the Bayrich Computer Specialist program, and we went on a trip to Queen's University, like the campus, to go see I can't remember what it was exactly, but it was some research thing that they're doing. The fourth year students were displaying their video game creations that they had done. So we collectively all took the 502, which is a bus that goes from Bay Ridge to downtown. We went there and we had a blast. Overall, this program has really helped me. And I can't wait to see it reach out to other communities across Canada and the world.
And I'm back. That's why it matters a lot. You know, I've seen it with my own eyes for so long. And before I talk a little bit more about other communities, I'd like to share a story that is really personal, actually. My daughter, I've helped create and champion this for years, and I've heard those stories secondhand. And seen him with my eyes, right? Walking in the community and, you're the bus guy. Hey, it's a bus guy, because I do all the training, right? But my daughter was diagnosed with autism when she was 14. A lot of things made more sense and a lot of good things now that we can figure out. But she was really anxious. She was nervous. The sounds, the senses, the timing. As if in grade 9, it was really hard for her. It can bring tears to my eyes thinking about who she is now. And I know that her autonomy, like she'll text us, say, oh, I'm just downtown with my friends, or I'm going to go to, she got a co-op placement. She's going to school. She goes to her tutor at Queen's University. And in 2 years, I can just see how, and I imagine how this has helped families and other people. And I think it's the best investment for our tax dollars at any level of government that just makes sense. Like it just keeps on giving back. We spend so much money in Canada on so many different things. And this one here, I just see the benefits, just the co-benefits they're just so many, right? And so whether it be lowering the cost of school programs or reducing greenhouse gases and traffic congestion, or making it easy for local business to get different employees, or supporting the local business, or the fact that we know it helps drive transit usage and ridership over time, providing equal access for youth of all, like, sometimes I've heard stories where, the family can't get their child, not in Kingston, but can't get their child to, an intervention or a health appointment. because they can only get one child to one of them, right? Like these are hard choices that shouldn't have to be. Building confidence in youth that we know and encourages independent travel, boosts participation in cultural programs or employment, and it increases access to different resources. Like my daughter, she was going to try to drive, but she loves the bus. And there's going to be other students that I've met in my time that driving won't be it won't be an option for them. And this gives them access to community. And I've seen that over and over and over again. And so I've been talking about this for quite some time in my, I had like hair when I started this, or talking about this and trying to do it in Kingston. By all means, we don't represent every one of these municipalities. It's not that. It's just that, we've helped some, we've, Get on the Bus has, been in conversation and connected with many of them and supplied them with reports or some of these resources or delegations in some communities, as I've been asked to do. These are communities that are investing in youth transit across Canada, and it's happening more and more. And now back to the climate side. That's why I care about this. We know that like 25 or something % of Canadian emissions come from the transportation sector. We're a large country. We're built around the automobile. We have a lot of mid-sized communities where people live, right? And if we invest in better transit, right, in the way of getting kids on the bus, helping families with that, right, moving communities around, getting more access to just opportunity as we electrify. You need people on the buses as well. We have to take, you know what I mean? So this is why I'm passionate about it. But I'm also, it's not just calling out every municipality. Municipalities, I've learned from the FCM, they collect about 10% of our tax dollars, but are responsible for like 60% of our infrastructure, right? And they're on the front line of so much. And so the municipalities in the mix, for sure, they're making decisions, but there's also opportunity to look for other levels of government to support. Like the Canadian government, the federal government gives a lot of money for things and capital. There's big announcement about transit funds, but the operation of these transit funds, these transit systems, is an opportunity for intervention. I look at maybe an opportunity is give money for operations to build youth programs, right? You build your ridership. And so I'll give you some examples of what I've seen or worked with and communicated with over the past while. It can look differently. I tell every community, wherever you start, is just start somewhere, right? The worst thing you can do is slam the door and say, well, it won't work here. We're different, right? It could be different in some communities, not that, but some communities are bigger than others, or it's more complex, or there's regional areas, but it still starts somewhere, right? For example, Burlington, they just, in 2023, they approved 13 to 19, not through the school system, but work evenings and weekends. You can see there that their pilot resulted in a 50% increase in youth ridership, and Council of February 25 just approved that there will be a summer pilot allowing youth to ride free in the summer months of July and August. This is a capacity thing. They're working it the right way, I think, or in a way that makes sense for that system to understand it, judge it as they're growing it, Orangeville, which is close to Burlington, Ontario, near in the Halton region, they actually went a while ago, in April 23, they said, youth and seniors are going to ride for free in our community. This is from the first week stats. This is what I'm able to sometimes pull things as the best as I can. So their first week, they had a large increase in both youth and seniors. But I also like the fact that I also saw here, there's a correlation of, there was an increase of adult boardings, which makes sense to me, whether it be seniors or youth in this case. Others are with them, paying, using it, understanding it, right? Now, Barrie, Ontario, I believe they have a high school program too. Again, as I'm saying, I'm not representing, I know I met with most of these communities, but I like championing what's happening in the different ways because it's heading in the right direction. And they're working on a field trip program. And they have a field trip program there where one tap can take that class and students, up to 5 adults, on the Barrie Transit Service. Now, truthfully, out east, this one has brought a tear to my eye on a Zoom call with people I didn't know. Not this one. I can hold it this time. But Halifax, I've been talking to quite some time over the years. They've been progressing, with 4 high schools to start in 2021, and they extended it to 6 junior highs as well as high schools. I forget the dynamic there, but what I can tell you is this: is in September of 2024, the province of Nova Scotia chipped in money as well for the region, and 28,000 students in 59 schools received a free transit pass. And that means so much to me. It's the thing I said about my daughter and everything I've seen firsthand in Kingston. And across Canada now, as more and more come online and figure it out. But that helps a lot of families. That helps a lot of GHGs. Like just the connectedness of what it can do while building transit systems just makes me so happy, you know. Now this is another word, and Halifax is a larger region than Kingston, so it's neat to see it moving in an area that is bigger too. And then the training and engagement and support. I know I haven't talked too much about that, but that is, I think, the next phase of what I'm helping work on too, is boots on the ground. What do you do with youth? Like transit systems, they don't necessarily work with youth directly all the time. They're a transit system, they're a municipality, right? Or they're part of the municipality or province, however it's structured. And so this is the importance of that, either school board or youth organizations, to help normalize the right behaviors too, and give students the freedoms and understandings and responsibilities, you know. One to say as well, I was asked to do a delegation to the TTC. Now, these transit systems, you know, if they're really big and they're normalized in larger cities, it would be harder to put all youth at the same time with the current resources. But what they came back with, which I thought was pretty cool, was they started a pilot that grades 7 through 12 will be able to travel on the TTC for field trips on Mondays and Fridays between 9 to 3. And again, this is where you start. You start somewhere. This was the transit system that's already busy, right? Doing a lot. I respect transit systems across Canada. And but they found time because of the work patterns that had changed within Toronto. So it was a little bit shorter. I want to open it up. This will be my last slide here. I definitely can pull some different stats or have a conversation. I've been talking about this for quite some time, but honestly, I can't see anyone's faces right now, so I'd like to stop. This is a bit about myself and where you can reach me. I would check out the getonthebus.ca. We've updated it. I'm trying to get more resources and council meetings and reports and as much as I can share openly, because I do believe this is like this idea of kind of 2.0 open, right? Like, how do we make this work for communities across Canada? And I'm going to stop sharing there, if that's okay, and come back. And I'd love to engage in a conversation and share what I can.
Yeah, I'd just like to start with a nice comment that came in from Shitangshu Roy. Shitangshu, he works at the Oath Project in Halifax. He's a Haligonian, and he's also a fellow climate reality leader. Shitangshu says, Haligonian here, Dan. You have no idea what this would have meant to be when I was a young person growing up in Halifax. Still remember thinking about which games I could go to on my soccer team, depending on the calculations of the bus costs. Thank you for helping my community make this a reality. That's such a beautiful and inspiring piece of feedback. Yeah.
Thank you. I said I wasn't going to cry, but I'm getting more sensitive these days. But this is why, like, we haven't met, and this is just me talking from this room in Kingston, you know. And it's not just me. It's just like, but now it's just going out there, the narrative and the people and the resources and the support, and thank you, because those are the stories that matter, you know.
Fatima says, thank you, Dan. This has been a very informative session. If this service was available when I was in high school, it would have been very beneficial. Rather, some youth make decisions to save their allowance for busing rather than use it for food for those finding themselves in low-income households. However, my question is, do low-income households also have an option to pay less for transit support?
In Kingston, yes, but I don't represent Kingston Transit, right? So like lower income households, this is free for all youth in Kingston, right? Or high school students. And what we've seen across Canada is that idea of a teenage, more, as you see, doing a little bit differently, 13 to 19 or evenings and weekends. If we're talking specifically about Kingston, there are affordability measures and passes for different circumstances.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And if anybody has any more questions, feel free to unmute yourself or drop them in the chat, depending on how you like to participate. I have a question for you, Dan. Oh, actually, Shitangshu has a question, so I'll save mine for after then.
You go first. You go first. I'm saving mine, so you go.
Dan, a lot of us who attend these types of calls are community advocates. I'm wondering, what was some of the largest pushbacks when advocating for the implementation of this in Kingston that you received? And do you have any pearls of wisdom for those who are looking to expand the initiative that you're doing now and try to launch something similar in their own communities?
Yeah, I think so. in 2012, this didn't exist anywhere, or at least it was very minimal, right? Across Canada. And I think part of it was the two systems that I'm lucky that I understood the systems. I understand how the municipality works and the school board works, right? This was part of my part-time job in Limestone as well. So I actually went to the director of education and said, could I build something to train these kids? Because there's this opportunity, but who's doing it? Right. And she was like, yeah, but I didn't have any money. So I actually had to write a United Way grant to get the first bus to do the tour. This was something I never think about or talk about truthfully. But I guess a couple of things of something that I've seen, right? I feel nowadays there's extreme stress, right? There's a lot of stress for a lot of people I've talked to at a lot of levels. My daughter, at 16, right? My wife, 43, myself, right? My parents, right? And so I think come to problems with compassion, right? That doesn't mean it can't be strong and it can't be well informed. But I think there's one to know that what I've showed you here took time in Kingston, right? It took time, right? Because it was incremental. That doesn't mean it can't all happen like we've seen in Oakville and stuff, or Halifax that is well planned out. The whole point is learning from what I'm doing here or we've been doing to make it faster and better and cleaner through knowledge share, right? The other thing I would say is to learn your systems, learn how decisions are made, right? They're made somehow. And so learn how they're made and have the right conversations with people. The other thing I would say, no matter what you work on, because I'm a climate reality leader as well, and this is just one of my projects. Truthfully, this one I love doing, but tomorrow I'm stressed out about a big tree program I've helped build. What I've realized, though, it's a lot about a narrative and communication, and humans love stories, right? And stories can connect, right? And so I think make sure that you're able to tell the value different ways, because in this case, a lot of times the transit systems across Canada, truthfully, they've been they're struggling right now, just even on operational support, right? The cost of everything's gone up, right? And as you see there, that municipalities take 10% of the taxes, but 60% they have 60% of the responsibility of infrastructure. So my point is I always come even at the staff level of well, how are we going to, what could we figure out together? Also for the municipality, if you're approaching municipalities or any organization, look at their official plans, strategic plans, operational plans, youth plans, whatever they have, and look for threads that connect to what you're trying to do, right? It's a lot easier to say, well, and not just screaming, you said you did this and you didn't. That's just where humans are right now. I always say hey, check these things out. Can I help you somehow, right? I don't know if you can put your hand up, Ashley. Could you put your hand up for a second? So imagine I was pushing forward. What would you do to me?
Push backwards? Or
yeah, exactly. And something I learned in Sweden, it was from a CEO of IKEA, Sweden IKEA, just as well, it's still big, it's theirs. But he said, ask for help, right? You don't have to, there's a lot of helpers that are willing to help, but they don't have to participate necessarily, right? And so, but if you approach something with a push, a lot of times we'll push back, right? And so it's like jujitsu, right? I did a bit of that, right? Not well, I just got a yellow belt. That's just one up from the purchase belt, right? But my point was, it was about using that energy and redirecting energy different ways, right? And so come with multiple ways to tell your story, the benefits. Look for the people that are already passionate and caring about this. Look for the other people that they might not be advocating out loud, right? We need those people, but we also need the people that some of their work ties to it. I can tie to pathways to education, talking about the value of students getting to school, right? Or the environment, passionate climate allies like this, where they're talking about, more people in the buses, more electric buses, less GHGs, right? Or the youth empowerment, or the principals, or the kids themselves, right? In my case, right? So always look for the different people that can bring part of their story to you and help tell the story through different mediums as well, and mechanisms, I would say, because I honestly not rarely, but I don't always talk about the environmental side of this. That's my background. But what I've realized, it's bigger than that. And I can say it different ways. And that's a co-benefit that if we can crack it, which I think we can, will come with it, right? And then we can celebrate it, So I'm sorry, that's a lot, but I think a lot about what I actually do now, reflecting back on how I do it, because I've had to say what I've done, if any of that makes sense. But it's not stuff that I think about daily. And I thank you for asking me, because how I'm trying to articulate this, I don't know if it's good or not, but it's how I think I'm doing it. If that resonates.
No, that was some fine advice. Thank you, Dan. Shatangshi, would you like to ask your question?
Hello. Hey, Dan.
Hey,
I
how
want to
are
say,
you?
first of all, thank you. I'm good. I'm so good. I want to say first of all, like I'm like so inspired right now. Thank you. Like just for the incredible work you're doing. It's also just the way you're speaking. Like even I'm thinking about like I'm taking notes about how you're presenting and this idea of narratives and how important that is. And when you're trying to move people to buy in for any social impact work, how do you do that? This hand thing you just said, that's great. And the idea of sharing different stories and kind of tailoring your message. All of that is incredible. I'm also reflecting, like I shared there, just it just I was like as you were doing, I'm like, which Halifax people am I gonna message to be like, get this person in there now? And truthfully, I've been away from Halifax in terms of living there for a couple years now, but to see that while I've been away, you've actually made this happen, and you and all the great people in Halifax actually made this happen makes me so happy because this is something our community definitely needed and really so many communities need. I'm reflecting even back to when I was at Cape Breton University, some young people and I created an organization called Project Assisting Volunteers to connect CBU volunteers to various youth organizations. And what assistance did volunteers need the most? Bus costs. And it was simple as that because $2 to $3 might for some people might not be a lot. For a lot of people, that is literally a meal. That is their lunch, right? And so, the fact that even those trade-offs are really fascinating. I want to ask about the business side, and I suspect you get this, and I think for some people that needs to be part of the narrative. I believe you said in your own background that you also look at business. I also transitioned to try and figure out the business side of social impact quite a bit, as much as you also critique the systems that we live in. So I guess what's interesting to me is you mentioned that from a business side, certainly in Kingston and some other places, there was an increase in adult ridership, which means that likely there's an increase in revenue for from like overall a bus side of things. So I was wondering if you can maybe share a bit more, and if you have some more data that's also valuable around, is there a business case to say that investing in youth is beyond the social impact side, which is of course where I think we should start, and the environmental side. There's actually it's actually like either your early customers who become your continued adopters. Like, is there a strong business case to justify it that way? And I was wondering, can you kind of explore the business side of this initiative?
Sure. So a couple things. So I'll give a link to two websites after. There's getonthebus.ca, which is the national movement. Before Get on the Bus, if you check out, I'm not just my own site, but it's dhendry.com under youth transit. I had no spot that I consolidated all the resources. Okay, so I saved every council report from the city of Kingston as it progressed through 2012, right, to 22 was when they made it a non-pilot. My point is, if you look through that documentation, you'll see both from this municipality's point of view, it is a bit different from other places, right? Because transit systems does depend on the community it's in the province it's in, okay? So the one thing you'll see there in Kingston is that there was a foregone thought. So to give all high school students free at the time, it was going to be a foregone $250,000 revenue loss. And that's very real, right? Like that is very real from a municipality that can't carry debt, right? They're trying to operate these systems. There's ongoing price increases. As I shared with you, they have a disproportional, I think, amount of responsibility for infrastructure in some way, right? In my opinion there. So you'll see there how it progressed through with not just the co-benefits from a social impact side, but from a financial point of view. And so the school boards, in our case, it's a partnership. It's called Kingston Transit High School Bus Pass Program. It should have been called Kingston High School Bus Pass Program because it is transit, but it's as equal to school boards involved in this. So there is money coming from the school boards. Now, what really made this more financially viable in Kingston as well in Ontario is that at the time, I think there's some narrative changing with the value of the co-benefits that I'm going to talk about in a second. But let me refocus. Okay, at the time, in Kingston, in Ontario, it has transit also has the ability to get the Ontario gas tax back for per capita ride because the school boards put money in to it didn't say how much per ride, but it has to be a paid ride, right? Because the school boards put money into this project, it actually allowed the provincial government gas tax to come to the city at a higher rate. Okay, so that was one unique thing here. The second thing is I can share with that email I said that there is an increase in paid ridership from youth, as you saw between 2017 and 23. Now, the biggest thing I would share with you here that I think that it's not public and it's not real yet, it's coming. Through my school board's job, I've helped fund a study for cost benefit and cost effectiveness analysis to bring in other societal factors. What is the dollar value normalized? The parent's time that isn't driving. What are the GHGs normalized? What is the attendance to school that wouldn't have happened otherwise? Jobs, volunteering, everything you're discussing. I know that's my Charlie and the Chocolate Factory golden ticket. I know those are the numbers that will make more efficient investment in our communities. Now that's coming through. It's going to take some time. It will be most likely it's going to be a public report because it's funded by public. But I've been working through that. It took me 3 years behind the scenes to try to get that together, and it's almost done. But you're 100% right. There has to be the business case. But I'll also go back and say it is a public service. So there's the balance between business case. And our municipalities they have to be run efficiently and well for the taxpayer, but they're there to provide a service as well, right? The more of the larger narrative we say that everything has to be a business, I don't agree with that. I think some things are meant to provide services that amplify other investments to help businesses, right? Like the fact of this bus pass that gets a kid down there for their first job, that business can't fill otherwise, that's a public service to that business as well, right? And so it's a very, very, very valid thought process and question, and I'm still tangled in it a bit, you know what I mean? A lot of municipalities start up front with like, well, we can't afford this. And they look at Kingston and say, well, we can't do all that. Yeah, but you looked at Kingston over 8 years of time as it grew, as we figured out, just start with one class, you know? But I'm very impressed with Halifax and your provincial government, or in Halifax there, because the provincial government gave money to expand this service, $1.2 million. That was a great investment, and it's a great precedent in Canada to show how these collaborations can work. So I hope some of that can get untangled. Those websites will have all those reports, as I said. And if you want to talk some other time about this, let me know.
Okay. Love that. Thank you, Don. Love your email if you're open to it.
Yeah, it's right there.
I think is there somewhere? Okay, fantastic.
I'll get it, and it'll be in the chat or whatever in a sec here.
Incredible. Okay, no, thank you. I think this is great. Thank you so much for sharing.
Halifax does like to be a trendsetter. I have to say that they have set a few precedents. Halifax has a 3% tax levy with their climate action initiatives. It's the first time in Canada that a municipality has ever had a levy that directly goes to adaptation, mitigation, and climate action. So Halifax, why can't you just spread your gospel everywhere? The person labeled BR, I'm not sure your full name, but would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, hi. Is my audio everything good?
Yep, we can hear you.
Dan, good to see you. I connected with you a while ago and connected you to some folks in Hamilton. So I've got 2 questions.
Okay.
And it's great to just see you continuing on this work, man. Just really, really happy about it. First one is if you have any sense of what's going on in Hamilton, because I'm not sure if I'm remembering correctly, but I thought you might have spoken to some of the like counselors or something like that. I was curious if you just had any updates.
Yeah.
And then the second one is because you're involved with so much of these transit talks. I was curious if you heard of this guy, Adam something, like a YouTuber, but he had this thesis, as I understood it, and he was really pushing for electric buses, tram kind of mixes for inner city things, like BRT line sort of things. And as I understood it, part of that was because the infrastructure for an electric tram bus would be cheaper than a rail line in the ground, a little bit less disturbing. But also if there's construction work and road work, the buses would still have battery packs, but they could be scaled down. So they were much less, the buses would be lighter, but they could still go off of these routes or paths when needed for construction or road closures, things like that. And I thought it was a pretty interesting concept. So I was curious about that in terms of like the business case and like infrastructure investments and this sort of stuff that you're looking at.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, for Hamilton, I meet with a lot, and it's been a long time. So I would say on my radar, this does not mean anything is happening, because the beautiful thing that I get to see once in a while is like all of a sudden somebody will send me like a link. They're like, hey, like this community is doing it now. I'm like, well, that's great, like, because like it's moving, right? Like that's the part. It's not held on to, it's just there, right? Like, and so for Hamilton, I don't want to say I haven't heard of anything recently, but I also haven't gone out and looked for it. I know at the time I was introduced to some different groups of people. I did a couple talk or a couple meetings. It was probably a year and a half ago now, I would say. They were definitely a good group of people that were keeping it on the radar. It was, I believe, very responsive as well around the time that there was an election, a municipal election. So that was around that time when there was a grassroots group talking about free transit overall. I definitely brought in this youth angle. I do think youth is a great way to start because the co-benefits, while it normalizes transit in the community, right? So I don't have an update on Hamilton themselves, but that isn't to say that there isn't work in that area. As for the other side of the infrastructure, it's a little bit more in my realm, but I do live in this space a lot. I've heard of some different things around just how are we going to do it the right way, so I like looking at things like, movement. There's a great guy in Vancouver. His name's Dennis Algar. He's created a ridership group. So check it out. It's called Movement on LinkedIn and socials. They're very progressive about bringing the voice of riders, right? Because the problem that I see in my own experience is that the voice of riders is decentralized, right? So you miss a bus, this or that, maybe you complain, but it's not as powerful other groups that are talking about, well, we don't want a bus lane. Well, if you asked everyone on those buses and looked over time, the efficiency of stuff, you'd have a lot of different perspective probably, right? So my point going back to that is as we catalyze and bring more ridership voice together and become maybe a little bit more uniform in the way of how we're looking at things, there could be better options like that for sure, from just the side of you're going to have opposition of, well, you're taking out this for that or doing this for that, right? And so it is about bringing the value as well as I think some of the voices that are somewhat decentralized, so they're not as loud, right? Like I get calls all the time in Kingston if there's an issue with youth, but I don't work for transit, right? Like, but I talk about it all the time, right? But I hear it, and then I can imagine if the city, if they're only coming in one at a time, or if they're not getting to the right person, if it's getting to operations over governance, remember, we have a voice to bring to our community leaders and we can send them emails, right? You know what I mean? And so my whole point is, I haven't heard much about the technology. I think it makes a lot of sense. Like I think a lot of our communities had the electric trams before we went to the automobile, right? You know what I mean? Kingston had a tram down its main road. I found that out while talking to someone not too long ago. And so these things have to kind of go chicken and egg together, I think, as we're bringing our voices together and trying to show the co-benefits of these things. But that's exactly right. If you can get more people talking about the culture and the usage and prioritizing it, I think other infrastructure things can come in as well. It's just that infrastructure takes time to build, right? Or get, right? Like if we want to electrify all the buses, well, how many buses do we need? And how long will it take to make, right? Like not even the cost, it takes time. And so still bring that story and the narrative and the passionate piece. And then I think we have more opportunity to slide in the right types of infrastructure as well, But if it's Adam, what was his name? Adam Somberg?
Adam something. That's
Okay.
his literal thing.
Oh,
I
okay.
have the
So when you said it there, I was like, well, what's that? I can get that later, but sorry, I wrote that down and that's funny.
That's his YouTube link. I found it on the Google. I also found information for the Halifax transit system, if anybody is interested in learning more about that pilot program. And then we have one question in the chat from Marianne that says, what are your thoughts about pushing for a pilot for one high school versus a citywide trial?
Well, okay. So one time years ago, how much time I got? Okay. One time years ago, I organized an off-grid concert on Earth Hour down at City Hall. Now that's not relevant to this, but it is. I'll tell you why. The first year we did really well. It was a warm March day. Okay. So as an organizer, as a group of people, we said, next year, let's challenge the community to drop our consumption by 20%, because we actually were monitoring with Utilities Kingston at the time. Now the next year, the temperature was like -20. Okay. Headline the next day, Earth Hour fails. Well, we set a goal. It was a very different temperature, right? And people said it failed, even though we did well, right? People are very critical. My point is, if you're bringing a conversation to a community, I think it depends on the community, but I would say at least start somewhere, right? I said that before, but I really mean it. Like, because there's a lot of other things that are moving in community, a lot of other priorities, a lot of other people thinking different things, advocating different things, right? And so, you know, like Oakville, from their point of view, from a transit point of view, they just said, let's do it, right? And they're probably, I'm guessing, for some of the logistics and communication and processes, learning like through that process. Kingston, it was thought out through high school because of how it originally kind of just started, right? It doesn't mean it can't be done differently. But what I would say is start somewhere. So if it's like, if the difference is between championing for the whole community right now, and them saying no and not getting anything, you know, I would try to start the conversation, because you're going to start building the capacity and allies and narrative and connections and people and support. And, you know, I had lunch with a guy yesterday just for business, and he looked at me and said, yeah, like my 3 kids use it, right? If I didn't, they wouldn't get to the sports if I can't take off work to get them there, right? You know what I mean? And so you start to build that common, just the everyday families that are using it, right? That is the most important voice, I think, because they're sharing. They're all taxpayers. They're all voters, right? Don't forget, kids have parents that vote. You know, I think that's an important piece. But I guess I don't have, if you gave me, not give me a community, but I think balance those 2 things. Can it happen fast? Yeah, there's going to be some changes in thought process. Depends on the courage and the understanding of your community and leadership, I would say. But start somewhere, right? If that makes sense. And there's great examples. If you go and get on the bus.ca, I try to click through everything. Like I say there, I don't own this stuff, right? Like it's like, but it's getting you to learn where everyone's doing. And I'm almost done, but we're going to have a whole community resource section where I've literally gone to every council meeting I could find on YouTube and ping the point in which they talk about it in that community. And these are only communities that have passed it, right? So you're going to start to hear the narratives from those that have done it. And I think that's an important, and the council reports. I know, I'm nerdy. Yeah. Well,
That's
my daughter.
powerful.
Yeah.
I love that. That's a powerful level of nerd, though. You keep doing that. That's
Yeah.
yeah. Vince, you have a question?
So yeah, basically I'm kind of the one who set
Yeah, I know. Thank you.
this whole thing up. I mean, I wasn't expecting it to happen so fast. I mean, how would you start something like that in a place like, let's say, me and Ashley, we're both in St. John, New Brunswick, right?
Okay.
And I've been here for like 2 years or so, since I'm originally from Quebec,
Okay.
north of Montreal, in a small town up there. But what I've seen for St. John so far is that the bus transit system is so bad. Literally, like, to get, let's say, from my place, from my apartment, to one of our biggest malls in the city, by a car, it's like, what, 20 minutes, half an hour to get to a McAllister Mall, I think. But by bus, it makes everything crazy, because by bus, it's always going to end up like an hour or more to get there.
Yeah.
So people who don't have cars and who need to go to appointments and everything, and who can't always take time to walk to every single appointment and then get all ready by the time they get to the next one, or by the time they get home afterwards, you know. They always end up having, like, you know, taxis all the time, which gets expensive, you know, after a while, even if it's just like once a week or whatever, you know, it gets expensive. So how would you change that, just to make the bus routes, you know, make more sense? Yeah.
Well, so this is where, you know, so a true story in Kingston, I have the YouTube video. I think I do. I'm going to say it because I know I saw it with my eyes. But when they were reflecting back after the years, the one counselor had been there for a long time, said, we used to call this thing the loser cruiser. Now it's the coolest thing in town, right? And transit systems inherently have been invested in necessary, right? Like, so my point is programs like this can bring more eyes to it. It will take time. Like I said, infrastructure takes time, right? But starting the narrative, even if you take some of these thoughts, look at Nova Scotia or Kingston, or even start with like Regina, that's just starting a pilot, right? It doesn't make people think that it doesn't have to be everything at once, right? But my point is, getting more people using it will create more demand for more investment. It will prioritize the narrative of it. It takes time. But I think even if you took this youth lens, for example, and said, look, at these other communities are doing this, could we start something like this? Now, like I said, parents vote, right?
Mm.
And it will take time. Transit authorities, again, I have tremendous respect for a lot of them because they're always trying, think about what they're trying to do. They're moving maybe dozens of buses all at the same time to try to people, no matter, and so this is something that will take time, but I think using something like this to leverage the conversation was a starting point, which eventually can help build and grow ridership. I didn't mention this in the presentation, but Kingston Transit actually went from 3.5 million riders in 2012 to almost 7 million in 2020. Like that's a lot for our town. We're like 150, 160,000 people, you know, but so it also helped prioritize investment. So I do not take credit for all of this by all means. I'm just a one person working part-time for the school board doing youth programming and some national stuff now. But I would say it takes time, but start in a positive spin because it's hard for those staff that are trying to do everything, I know, but they're also just trying their best with what they got. So the more resources, more caring, the more narrative, the more usage, the more reason for investment too, right? And brings more people together, those voices,
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that, Dan. That was a wonderful way to kind of finish off here. I have so much deep gratitude for you spending this time and sharing your wisdom with us. I know that there are many people that are going to have so many follow-up questions. So we hope to see you back in some way, shape, or form in the future. To everybody who was able to spend their time with us today, thank you so much on behalf of the Atlantic Canada Climate Network and the Canadian Environmental Network. I hope that everybody is able to take this into the future and create some local change within your neighborhood. And of course, reach out if you have any questions. We would love to connect you with Dan. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Connect whenever.